I'm now on the historic island drive around historical James Island. This is part of the historic Jamestown settlement, and there is a 5-mile drive that goes around the island, and I just wanted to show you the landscape around here. One thing that has really surprised me about Virginia, particularly this part of Virginia, Williamsburg, Jamestown, Yorktown, is the amount of forest in this area. And the forest was also part of the economic plan of the original settlers here, who actually cut down some of the wood, different types of wood that were sent back to the English mother country. Virginia didn't have the riches of Latin America, the colonial riches of gold and silver, the way they were found in South America. So a lot of the products that were sent back to Britain during the early colonial years were agricultural products, particularly tobacco. So when the early settlers came here in 1607 and founded the Jamestown settlement, which was the first permanent settlement in North America, shortly thereafter they started to grow tobacco, and that became a source of great wealth for the colonies. And tobacco was extremely popular with the British at the time, so the demand for that commodity was huge. But what it also required, it was a very labor-intensive crop to grow. And originally there were very few settlers here, so later on they basically turned the local Powhatan native tribe into indentured slaves and servants, and later on, of course, in the 17th century, as was typical of Britain at the time, a slave trade with African slaves also started. So the history of Virginia here in this area is inevitably intertwined with the history of slavery. One of the characteristic areas of the Williamsburg area is that you can visit a number of historic plantations. We're actually staying on a former plantation, the historic Powhatan Plantation. I'm going to be turning west now to complete the smaller loop of the tour here on James Island. And so it's a very, very interesting history. Basically, 3 cultures that came together and collided here. The Indian culture, or native culture of the Powhatan Indians that have lived here for about 10,000 years along the James River and in southern Virginia. Then the European British colonial settlers that started arriving in the early 1600s. And then, of course, the African slaves that were imported. When was slavery abolished? I think 1863, if I'm not incorrect. So basically 2.5, almost 3 centuries of slavery that characterized particularly the American South, which of course became an issue in the American Civil War of the Confederate States fighting against the Union affiliated states. So truly Virginia here is a very, very fascinating place for history buffs. The very first vestiges of European settlements here from the early 1600s all the way up into the 1800s. 1700s, of course, a lot of the settlements in Virginia, in Williamsburg, Colonial Williamsburg, were built. And I'm planning to actually pay a visit to the campus of William and Mary University, which is, I think, the 2nd oldest university in the United States, being chartered as a Royal University in 1693. And there are 3 very historical structures there from the 16 and 1700s. so I'm planning to cover that maybe tomorrow or the day after. But this part of Virginia is definitely a wonderful place for anybody who loves history, and with this I'm signing off with the driving tour from the historical Jamestown settlement, and will return to you from another historic location in Virginia.